You don't sound like a college-educated woman. You didn't learn anything about history. Did you take a history class?
Sure did.
You didn't learn a doggone thing. Because if you don't understand why your mother was working where she was working and doing the kind of work that she did and did not get a college education, it's because you don't understand your history and what went on in America during her age, a woman in the 60s or 60 and over. And you have the audacity to turn down your nose at her for doing what she could to keep your little behind alive and well.
I just don't live my life as a black person, so.
What you live your life as?
I live my life as a person of privilege.
You live your life as a lie.
To those
That's
of
why,
white people.
because you said the man that you went to live with, his family was privileged, not you.
Well, that's the life
So
that
you
I
live in a
created
lie.
for myself.
Okay.
That's the life that I created for myself, and she ruined it.
So how
she
did she
ruined
ruin
that,
it?
and she ruined my relationship with everybody.
How did she ruin your life? And how did we get to this $600 claim?
Because, Your Honor, once I got enough money to get away from her, I moved away. I didn't give her my number. I didn't give her my address. I told her if I wanted to get in contact with her that I'd reach out to her. But no, she is stalking me. She showed up one day to a grocery store in my neighborhood, stalking me down in the aisles, trying to talk to me in front of all these white people.
Oh my God, what a terrible thing.
Well, and then the following week, she shows up to my job, causing a ruckus. And when she did that, she's just at the door saying, "Oh, there's my daughter. I need something to say to my daughter, blah, blah, blah." And
what
I
was
see
your
her.
job?
I'm a dancer.
What kind of dancer?
A burlesque dancer.
Burlesque dancer.
Yes.
College educated, that's the best you can do?
Yes, I'm still in grad school.
Oh, what you in grad school for?
Law.
Okay. Law? Who are you going to represent?
Myself.
Yeah, you're right. Just you. Because not too many people would hire you with your state of ignorance. So your mother is outside asking for you, not asking, but telling people that's my daughter and I want to see her.
Right, and she sent that to my boss.
And?
And now he's asking me if that's my mom. And so, of course, I had to say no, because they can't have people like her in there.
What? You mean black people, you're dancing at a burlesque club somewhere in Alabama that's still racist?
Listen.
And black people aren't allowed?
Within the context of my education, if you could call it that, I would prefer to call it the course of my indoctrination, my training, which started in Ethiopia, East Africa, and continued in Brazil, Cuba, Puerto Rico, the United States Virgin Islands, England, and Spain. Been around a few places. And in all of these places that I've been, I never once received an education in the history of African people. Yet I thought that I've educated myself down through those period of time. And it is because of that self-education in those things which meant most to me as an African person that I decided at no time would I stand still in these halls of indoctrination and not rebel with the necessary documentation of the lies that are being taught in these halls. And so I may be saying things that may hurt many of you, if not most of you, because some of the lies have become your dear frame of reference. We could start with the Greeks. I hope you of fraternities and sororities don't get too bothered about it, since the Greeks weren't too much anyhow. But we can start with that, because there is where our institutions of learning has decided to start civilization. Yet the Greeks are only here from at least 1,000 before the Common Era, or before the Christian era, as you would prefer to say. Let us just, for example, cite one. And that particular person would be Hippocrates. And I'm sure that you heard of Hippocrates. And when you consider that Hippocrates wasn't born until 333 BC, or before the Common Era, yet in your education you were told that Hippocrates is the father of medicine. That's a lie. There's no way that I can say about it other than it's a lie. A lie is a lie, whether it's in the university or in the church. How could Hippocrates be the father of medicine when the first time you see him, he is in Egypt learning medicine from Africans? There are numerous papyri, medical papyri on medicine. The nearest to Hippocrates is at least 1,300 years before he was born. For example, we have what is known as the Hetus papyrus, the Ebers papyrus, and now the so-called Rockefeller papyrus, the Edwin C. Smith papyrus. All of these papyri go back to as early as 3100 BC. The man who Hippocrates took an oath that he would practice medicine according to this man, this African, whom the Greeks call Aesculapius in the Hippocratic Oath, a man by the name of Imhotep, died. He practiced medicine and died 2,500 years before the birth of Hippocrates. And you are telling me that the medical school and the pre-medical historians don't know this? They don't know it because, unfortunately, Imhotep had a high visibility like myself, otherwise called black. They don't know that the Ebers papyrus by Hatshepsut, dealing with Planned Parenthood, I said Planned Parenthood, 1,550 years before the birth of Jesus the Christ, is out there, when every medical journal in 1961 published copies of the Ebers papyrus. And we could go on with the papyri with respect to all kinds of diseases that the Africans had produced, both in Egypt and Ethiopia and Sudan, and a place then called Puanit, now called Somalia.
I believe, and I'm sure you two gentlemen agree with me too, that Dr. Ben is one of our greatest historians / scholars / speakers / Africans that have ever been produced, and especially that has given us the information that he's given us and shown us the greatness of our ancestors. You saw the video, you saw the clip that I showed that was playing before Dr. Ben. So, of course, that lady does not represent all of us, but she represents too many of us. And whether these people want to be white or not, it's the Negro mindset. She represents too many of us. Dr. Ben's information, in my opinion, is important and it is relevant. It is needed, and it should be in schools. It should be in institutions, homeschools, all these things. They should be teaching Dr. Ben. But in a culture of such confused people as we are today, because too many of us have the Negro mindset. Too many of us are confused. Too many of us have degraded behavior. How is Dr. Ben's information useful? How is it relevant these days? I know we talk a lot about critical mass, that we don't need to worry about the masses because we can create critical mass. So thinking about information from scholars like Dr. Ben and also looking at the critical mass conversation. How do we make information like this relevant, not just within the critical mass, but beyond that, but also looking at the critical mass? Is the critical mass, is that something that can be effective? That's what I really want to explore with this. Is the critical mass something that can be effective? And if so, in what ways can it be effective? Because I want to challenge our thinking, because we talk about critical mass a lot. So I want to challenge our thinking. Looking at the information like Dr. Ben, how can we use this within the critical mass and even beyond the critical mass? But also, is the critical mass, is that something that can be effective? Pat, you got your eyebrows furrowed, so I want to start with you, just because they were furrowed.
There's a lot here. To your specific question, I do think the critical mass point is valid. Like, and I think if we can achieve a critical mass is effective. It still works. We know that it works. We see it working all over the place. When we look at pop culture and things like that, whenever somebody reaches critical mass, there's an explosion of activity. We frequently see it as when like an artist blows up, and we talk about, oh man, they blew up after that. They reached a critical mass. The challenge we have is, as time progresses, I think the number required to reach that critical mass keeps getting bigger and bigger. And that's the difficult part. Like, so, 200-300 years ago, you could probably hit a critical mass by reaching a couple hundred to 1,000 people. Nowadays, because of the advent of social media and everything else, you probably need to reach something close to 1 million people or more to hit a critical mass. And I'm not saying that those people need to be following you, but I'm saying that probably at least 1 million people need to at least have made contact with some aspect of you, be it an idea, a thought, a theory, music, some sort of create something that's associated with you. That many people probably needs to be touched by it. Even if it's just like 1 million people viewing your content with regards to social media. And that's a hard thing to achieve.
That's a hard sell. That's why I'm like, you like 1 million people. I'm like, that is that even still critical mass?
No, but it is. And see, and then the other thing too is we got to talk about the nature of connections. Like, so 200-300 years ago, right? Because the connections were so different, they were also stronger. When you made a connection with somebody, you made what would be considered like a real connection. Somebody come across your article in the newspaper, well, maybe not 200-300 years ago, but somebody come across your idea. They're coming across an idea that has had time to develop, and that is usually, by the time it's reached that person, there is a level of sophistication and a level of strength behind the idea that it makes an impact. And also the fact that it was a lot harder for ideas to travel back in the day. Nowadays, again, because of the advent of social media, we're coming across millions and millions and millions of ideas in a year. You're talking about thousands of ideas a day, some people.
Yeah.
So because of the increased frequency of the amount of connections, the sophistication that has come about creating these fairly weak connections, you need so many more to make an impact. My kids nowadays could talk to me about 4 or 5 different brand new artists that they heard music from today, and it means nothing.
Yeah, Lil Young.
When we were growing up, if you heard about a new artist, you didn't hear about it that often.
It's a couple years, months.
Yeah, so By the time you hear about them, they got a body of work. You can go back and look. Nowadays, kids is coming up to me with, man, you heard about such and such. They only been working for like 2-3 months. They don't have no body of work. So I think it's a lot of different things that go into it. I think critical mass still works. The difficulty we're having is that it's so much harder to reach a critical mass because the amount of, and then it's just the population, the sheer size of the population on the planet. There's more people around. It's just harder to reach that critical mass. So, you know, we if we want to break it down, I think we break it down in terms of like mini masses. You know, instead of talking about the one big critical mass is gonna make everything pop, but we talk about the small critical mass that, you know, kind of creates a temporary explosion where instead of you catching on or an idea catching on, it just picks up maybe 50 new supporters instead of the 1 or 2 that it usually get.
All right. All right. So PC, same thing. Looking at Dr. Ben's information, a confused culture of people, how's his information relevant? And also the critical mass, challenging the critical mass. Do you think the critical mass could work? And if so, why? If not, why?
Well, the critical mass always works. You have the 80, what is it, the 20-60-20 rule?
The what is it, 80-20, the Pareto principle?
Yeah, you got that, and then you know, an adaptation to that is the 20-60-20, where is you have people who are the elites, you have people who are the dregs of society, and whoever is more effective will get the other 60%, will get the middle, because the middle is basically full of followers. So we can go to the 80-20. The bottom line is, you brought up something, Patrick, that was interesting, because you talked about how there were in the past, you know, you needed fewer people, but also, you know, we're just talking about population density now. There was a time where you had a lot less distractions in the world. So now you got the 24-hour news cycle. You have people who are inundated with being bombarded with information, misinformation, things that turn you in all different directions. You don't have to prove anything anymore. And so people basically now just trying to make their own rules in society. So can it work? Yeah. What does those numbers look like? I would think you would need somewhere around 3% of your population. Same percentage. So I think the numbers are bigger because there's more people in the world. But I think the population that you need, the people who are the leaders, the people who are willing to put it on the line, I still think you need the same similar percentage. The American Revolution was fought with about 3% of the population. The Haitian Revolution, I believe, it was fought with like what, 5-10% population. So you don't need a great deal of people or a great majority. You just need some really influential, courageous people that are willing to lay it on the line. But you have to also create those the energy around those revolutions. For the Haitian Revolution, it took about 12, 13 years before they actually got it up and moving. It started in the plantations. It started on the hill with Boatman's Prayer. This is way before the actual fighting took place. The planning and preparation, weeding out those who were going to be with you and those who were against you. Same thing with the American Revolution. They wrote, I believe Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense. I might be getting the names wrong, but Common Sense document, you know, newsletters were being passed around in different taverns, and in every tavern and every colonial holding post, you had people gathering and talking about this, and we were stirring up the energy for this. So it's definitely possible. Our biggest problem is our enemy. We use the same means of communication that's controlled by our enemies. I mean, even this one. on YouTube. If we say the wrong things, they'll shut your channel down. When I say the wrong things, what goes up against their, power structure, they'll shut the channel down just to stop the information from flowing to the people who need to hear it. There's mechanisms in place right now, checks and balance in place right now that are perpetuated to put people in perpetual fear. Perpetual fear of losing their jobs, perpetual fear of being able to feed their families. They've gotten Black people to buy into the comforts of being in the first world country while still suffering from egregiouses that don't occur in third world countries. But we've gotten comfortable with being this oppressed. We've gotten comfortable with the pressure of the foot that's on our neck. So can it? Yes. Will it? That remains to be seen. Let's keep in mind that when we're talking about this, you're talking about people who are ex-fighters, people who want to be liberated, not rebelling against the system, but want to be liberated from the system. That's a whole different can of worms. For as many of us, and we like to talk about the successful rebellions, and we talked about a few weeks ago with the rebellions and on the plantations and all the different things that happened. It's a glorious history if we tell that piece, but that was a very small fraction of the members of Black people who were enslaved on those plantations. And a lot of those people who were too afraid to fight, they're now ancestors to somebody, as we call them, clancestors, because they're defeated souls. So they would rather fight us than fight their open enemy because it's a safer battle, it's a safer fight, with fewer and smaller consequences for when you do harm to one another, you do harm to each other. Going back to the first clip, that sister it was nothing to see a sister like that back in the day because the bed wenches and the mammies were plentiful on plantation, along with the house Negroes. So those are people who had children, who had great grandchildren, who now represent that same ancestral energy. We talked about building it and what it would look like, and I would liken it to Maroon societies as the original patch. But then you would have to get more Black people to buy into stepping off of this plantation we're currently on. And a lot of us are extremely comfortable with the dwellings that we've been given by our Lord and Saviors, the white man and white woman.
See, okay, I'm about to be devil's advocate. All right. Because I'm listening to what Dr. Ben is teaching us, especially going into information on Imhotep. And I know I did my further research on Imhotep and the impact that he had not only in Egypt, but the impact that he had in Greece. So for me, that translates to we genetically we have it in us, or historically we have it in us that we are the doctors, so we can produce our own medical systems. We can do for self because we do have Black people who are genius enough and skilled enough in the medical field. So we can do it because we got historical precedents to show that we can do it. Also, we have historical precedents that shows, because I do agree that critical mass does work. And we got historical precedents that shows that his critical mass does work. Do we have the people today, though, the Black people who are alive today? Do we have the people to become the critical mass today? Do we have it in us?
So those are two different questions. Because we have the people, but that second part, do we have it in us? Yeah, you look at the congregation in the church that Denmark Vesey built, and how they allowed the devil to come sit amongst them, pray amongst them, and then pray on them. and then they went to pray for him after he killed members of their congregation. We have the DNA, but there's also and Patrick talks about this a lot, the epigenetic memory of the
Right.
fear that comes with standing up against white people, because we know that their reign of terror leaves a trail of blood. Most aren't built for that.
I think so. I think the answer to both your questions is yes, but to me, the more difficult question is, how do we access it? I think we do have the people nowadays to spark a critical mass. And I do think we have the people within our community that could really make something special happen. But we have to ask, okay, well, if we have the people, we have the ability, how do we access it? And I think that's the part of the conversation that goes left, because the fact of the matter is, in order to access it, we've got to build a system that they believe, that they see offers them more benefits than the one they're currently in. People are not going, like, that part has been taken. People are not going to sacrifice for some future good. That's not going to happen.
But
Go ahead.
But to me, that's one of the issues, and kind of a spit in the face of the information to what people like Dr. Ben have done, because they are showing, they have given us information to show us, and like in the clip, showing us that even in times where white people were not in opposition, even in times where white people were in opposition, they have shown us that black people, even in critical mass, have been able to build and able to excel and able to succeed. But we in these times now, and it's waning. Like because I think, in my opinion, I think one of the effects of that, though, is we know Dr. Ben's information. We know that, but do enough of the people who would be a part of this critical mass know the information, and have they utilize the information to help themselves to become an effective part in that critical mass?
Yeah.
Well,
let me say this.
I'm gonna be the bad guy today.
No, it's cool. Here's the ugly truth of it.
Okay, let's get it.
When you're trying to reach a critical mass, the problem is not with the mass. The problem is with the tool that you're trying to reach them with. And that's the ugly truth of it. When we reference back to what they were able to do in during times of slavery and all of those other times, we have to reference also back to the context of the situation. I know both, you guys know this.
Right.
But in those contexts, in those situations, dealing with a less perfected, less sophisticated system, black people were deprived of hope. Hope is the tool that we used in those days to reach the masses, and it was effective because they were in an environment where they had none. Now they're in an environment where they are allowed to hope, and they are given some measure of reward for daring to hope. So hope no longer becomes an effective tool for reaching people. So our job at this point becomes, okay, well, what is an effective tool? And we keep trying to use the carrot of hope, where the hope has been taken in the sense that a lot of them feel like, if my kid does well in school and gets a good education, they'll have a good job and can live a better, that's their hope. Right. Now.
Right.
The fear of somebody, busting in their house and shooting them in the head for being black, it is there, but there is a hope because of all of the superficial and minute changes that have been made, that won't happen, that can't happen. It hasn't happened thus far to me or anybody I know. So the tool of hope has been missing. And even when we talk about and this is where I go back to, I think one of the biggest problems is we hype individuals, right? So Hemotep is the first recorded physician in written history, in recorded history. He's
Right.
the first one. That is a well-known fact. Even amongst it, like, people know that. What they don't know is that he wasn't the only genius. His whole family was geniuses.
Yes.
All of them were capable. And
Yeah.
so what that speaks to is not the fact that he came from a special family. He came from a community where there were probably a lot of educated people that were very capable. But instead of us highlighting the community that would house an entire family of geniuses, we focus on the one genius that we know. And I think that becomes a problem. You start talking again about the path of medicine between Imhotep and Hippocrates. Hippocrates. Anyways, you're talking about
He earned his name.
the code of Hammurabi. You know, you're talking about what is it called? The Ibarra's papers. You're talking about all these other things that happen in that region. I know the Hammurabi thing, that was Babylon. But you're talking about a lot of these other things that happened in that little bubble
that
in
far
Northern
east.
Africa that all kind of led the way and opened the door for Hippocrates to come along and do what he did. So, you know what I'm saying? I think all of those steps, and you're talking about like at least 3,000 years of activity from black and brown people missing between Imhotep and Hippocrates, that is just, and so I think that information, filling in those gaps of communities, you know what I'm saying? Not individuals, communities.
But that's getting to one of my points, though. That's getting to one of my points, because
which is
Dr. Ben has given us the foundation. The scholars they have given us the ancestors. They've given us the foundation. We didn't go look for that. We didn't go look for the information.
Oh yeah, I'm not criticizing.
No, right.
Dr. Ben.
No, I'm not. I know you're not criticizing Dr. Ben. No, I'm saying that about the people, because that's my overall point. Is you have people who have dedicated their lives to giving us this information. And yeah, we talk about creating a critical mass, but really, and I hear what you're saying, but if we're not willing to go research the research.
Well, Joe, and I hate to interrupt you, and I'm gonna shut up so PC could go.
Nah, do it.
But this is what I'm gonna say to that. One of the failures is exactly what you keep articulating. They kept giving us information. At what point do the master teachers become the teachers that are no longer giving us information, but demanding scholarship from their students? And I think that's something that, as a community, our elders and those teachers, if they had one failure, that would be it. We never reached a point. Dr. Claude Anderson is still alive right now, and he's still giving information. I haven't seen, and my absolute favorite, Dr. Amos Wilson, I've never seen a lecture or a statement or a book or anything from any of them demanding that their students become teachers and that they stop seeking to absorb information and start trying to add to the historical information that's already been created. And so I think this whole paradigm starts with there. At some point, an elder has to understand that the next generation has to be able to function without them and has to surpass them.
Right.
And that means I don't teach you anymore. I demand that you create your own knowledge and you start teaching me things. And I think that's one of the shortcomings that we're running into when you say what you say.
All right. PC.
Oh yeah, I just want to lob that one too. All right, so
Chris Paul.
hey man, it's cool. So and I think that's a good point. You know, teaching our young people to go out there and actually become explorers of the world, teaching them to go out there and bring something back. They then will have a stake in what goes on. So it's not just memorization, it's not just the who's who of Jeopardy. They actually have to endure what it means to actually discover who we are, where we're from, and attach a legacy to that. I think all those things are important. Um, I'm a bit of a pessimist when it comes. I don't see pessimist, but I believe it's like a realist, but it sounds pessimistic. Only because the how effective the programming has been in terms of programming us to become lazier, lazier, and lazier. And then when you think about the biological and chemical warfare that's been going on in the Black communities, where you dilute the water with all sorts of toxins, and you make sure that we live in food deserts, so people are surviving off the worst types of food that causes the type of mental congestion that we're dealing with right now. I think it creates an environment that will make that very difficult because we can't, when we operate, we have to operate knowing that our enemies didn't stop warring against us. So they're going to consistently bombard us. And it takes me back to 2013 when the world was on fire because George Zimmerman got away with killing Trayvon Martin. And there were people meeting, there were brothers and sisters meeting in the parks. They weren't just out rallying the streets, they were actually doing political education. And all it took for us to get distracted was Kendrick Lamar's verse. I forget it was a control verse or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And all the brothers jumped right off of the bandwagon that we were building and jumped right onto that. And I saw it with my own eyes. And I've seen it happen time and time again. Black people making progress, all of a sudden somebody get into a fight in the elevator. Now that's the topic we're talking about now. You got people taking knees. Now that's what we're talking about now. And so we move to a place where we're easily distracted. The A has been inflicted into the mindset of all of us, but specifically our young people. And because it's hard for them to maintain focus for longer than 8 seconds now, and that's why they do the shorts for 8 seconds. I think those are some stumbling blocks for us. So when we talk about a critical mass, we might have to figure out a way to utilize the things they're doing right now to stir our people back. The problem with doing that, though, is we don't have mastery over that, and our enemies do. And they have a better control over our children. So when we talk about the master teachers don't hold a feather to somebody that's making 6 figures in the eyes of a lot of people that would look up to them.
Those are the new masters.
That's what the people, well, and look at what they're teaching. Come get this bag, be like me, be out here in these streets or do this and just chase the bag. Don't give them no instructions, just chase the bag, and you got so many people looking up to them and worshiping them. They become the new idols. So a master teacher walks into the room and gets no respect. Nah, I see how you living. You're a poor righteous teacher. I ain't trying to go out like that. I'm trying to, get this paper. And that's the mindset of so many people. Or you have them back to where we started. I just want to be a scholar. I just want to be able to debate people on YouTube, be in these comment streets. and debate people and call people out, call people fakes and frauds, say y'all ain't out here doing no work, and I want to be the one to call that out. So you have people who do that. We have people who are destructicons, people who can destruct all the arguments we're putting out here, but not actually, put anything constructive together. That's why they have so many hours to watch a goddamn YouTube video. So, and I'm not saying that, hey, listen, y'all watch the show, support. But what I'm saying is, the real work is out here in front of us. And as much as I would love for us to be more scholarly, the people who actually did liberation work in the past did so because they knew it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. They did so because they'd rather die on their feet than live on their hands and knees. And they did so from a perspective of having courage, but also love for their people. Black people don't even like who they are to death. You tell somebody they're African. Yeah, you tell somebody that they're African right now, they have a whole fit, or they have African blood in them. They have a whole fit. You tell somebody that they're black right now and they have black features. Next thing you know, they're going to some type of cosmetic surgery or something of that nature. Like I said, and it's crazy because when I was going into high schools, and I would ask the children in diverse high schools to identify themselves. You ask the Asian kid, who are you? Well, I'm Japanese, and I come from this particular country, and then they start telling you about their personality. You ask a Latino kid, well, I'm half Mexican, half Puerto Rican. Boom, boom, boom. Go down the line. You ask the black kid, well, I like to play basketball. They call me Long John Silver because I get the beads. You know what I mean? You ask the young sister, well, I'm a hairdresser and I like to do nails. They never even understand who they are. So when I asked them, I said, well, why didn't you identify as black? The first thing they said was, well, we just assumed everybody else knew who we were. But how do everybody else know who you are when you don't know who you are? And you've never been taught that. And your parents would rather call you Muslim, or they'd rather call you Christian than call you black, or call you, a descendant of African. They don't, so it's like the buy-in. I've seen fist fights break out over who the top rappers are because somebody's tied to the best rapper. I've seen fist fights break out. People break their own damn TVs because of the civic pride they have in their local sports franchise, but they don't have that same feeling for being black. So when I say that the critical mass can happen, it's in us, but is it in us? It's in us that we have that information. It's certified. But
it's the spark there.
The heart, the soul is willing, but the flesh is weak. And until we get to that place, it's going to be hard to find the foundation to which we can do that. And times are getting worse. More homeless family. I walked past a sister today, beautiful sister, but she was homeless. And I just watched her pick her bag up off her back and slam it on the ground as I walked. And I was just walking past on the street. There was a time when you didn't see a lot. If she wasn't strung out on drugs, you didn't see a lot of black women that were homeless. You see that now. And the numbers are increasing and it's spreading to more and more neighborhoods and communities. The shrinkage gentrification is spreading to more and more communities. And right now, and how many times do we grow up watching Boys and Menace to Society when they said that black shit don't get no play in this ride?
What?
These are the grandchildren of that right now.
You're speaking my language now. You're speaking my language because we have to be realistic about where we are in America, our real position here in America. We have to be realistic about it. We have to, right? Because we know, oftentimes.
So hold on, real quick, John.
Go ahead.
Joe, I don't mean to interrupt you. Economic forecast came out, right? And you know when we started the Brothers Building Brotherhood program, we talked about the economic forecast. So over 1.5 million jobs, about 1.5 more million jobs are planning. They're planning on firing people by
Man,
the end of this calendar year, and they have
man,
already just let off people. Like Amazon just had a big thing where people walked into work and found out they were fired that day.
yeah, I saw that. I saw that. What was I gonna say? I forgot.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, bro.
Bang, bang. But it's like, and I just say this, but when I was in college, I had a professor, Professor Jeffrey Mills. Shout out to Professor Mills. He was so excited. We came to class one day, and he was so excited, and everybody like, what you so excited for? He's like, man, I got a clip, I got a video of Dr. Ben. Do y'all know about Dr. Ben? Now at that time, I had only known him as Dr. Yosef Ben-Jochannan because my brother have some roster friends, and we would go around with them and sit around and watch tapes of like Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and Dr. Sabi. And this was VHS days. This is like before the DVDs like really got popping. And so Professor Mills was so excited to show us a clip of Dr. Ben. And then, you know, when it started playing, I was like, oh yeah, Dr. Yosef Ben-Jochannan. I just wasn't used to the Dr. Ben, but I just think as we talking, I just think about how excited he was to show us this information because he knew how critical Dr. Ben's information is and was. And it's paining me because we have to be realistic about our situation and where we are in America and how bad we are doing that. This doesn't mean we have to stay bad. This doesn't mean looking at the situation and just saying, okay, well, we can't do nothing about it. I know a lot of people have those attitudes, and that's why I don't think a lot of them people really as conscious as they say, because they don't think we can do anything about it. But information that has been given to us that I feel like it can help that spark, though, if the information is given, especially if it's given right. But also critical thinking is put to it is not necessarily Dr. Ben the challenge, but people are challenging themselves, their thinking, challenging their thoughts and everything around information, how they can use the information and all these different things. We just, like you said, Pat, not just consuming the information, because I mean, I hear you when you're talking about critical mass, but that's possibility. What's the probability?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I just have a different.
No, I get you, but that's good though. We need this discourse.
Well, no, because yeah, I agree with that. I think what PC said was relevant. Like, they've been in control for so long that in order for us to reach our people, we've got to use the tools that they use. The problem is they use them better. They created them. But we should have the advantage in knowing our people. So I think that's where you run into, like, that's where I go into. I agree with you, Joe, 100%. Even with all my criticisms of the master teachers, they did what they were supposed to do.
Yes.
In every regard.
Yes.
With the exception of the one I mentioned earlier. But that's the only exception. They did what they needed to do. Because that challenge piece wasn't put into place, we are now a people that are groomed to consume. And even those of us that consider ourselves intellectual or blah, 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 we're still groomed to consume. We're looking for intellectual content to devour. And we like putting content out. But usually it's basically a recreation of work that we want to impress people, not with our willingness to go out on a limb with a new theory or a new approach or something new, something built on what they did. We want to step out on the information that's already been put out there, and we want to show people how smart we are based on information that somebody already created. And I think that you know, one of the things I think we've got to do, again, even with critical mass and stuff, is we've got to be honest about not only where Black people are, but the tools that are needed to reach Black people. I think a lot of us are getting honest about where we are as a community, but we're still fighting that battle of what tools do we need to reach our community, because a lot of us think that the masses of people are smarter or more aware than they actually are. And that's the truth of it. Even if we want to say they're intelligent, cool, I got no problem with that. But when you say they're more intelligent and more aware, now I'm looking at you crazy. There's no way in hell they're more aware.
We can look at the
and
actions.
doing what they're doing.
We can look at, but so in my opinion, that's one of the things I love about these breakdowns is I know, you know, like these stemmed out of the conversation that we would have on the phone, and we talk like this all the time, but information or people have to be challenged to think. Like Dr. Rashidi, when we would talk, he would always ask me what I think. What you think about this? Well, what do you think about this? And it's like one live stream we were doing, and he you know, he pulled a Jedi, one of them Jedi master tricks on me, just kind of took it over, and wasn't nothing I could do about it. But it was cool because it's still, but I was expecting him to give the information on a specific person, but now he flipped it. Well, tell us about this person and tell us what you think about what they did and how it affects us and stuff like that. You know, he's always asked me what I thought, and always challenging me to think. But also, same as like my daddy, my daddy he is technical theater. Like, why does that make sense? Are you sure that makes sense? Because, you know, and I love when people challenge what you think you know, and then make you, because the object is you as the individual is not supposed to waver on what you believe or what you think, especially if you done your due diligence. But the way they're giving it to you, it's like, oh well, shoot. But it's about the training of us to really look at the information and look at the things and ask ourselves, does this make sense? Will this work? What is this? Why is this? When is this? Who is this affecting? All of these questions have to be asked. Like, okay, once again, we got this information on Imhotep. In my opinion, the way I look at it is this is showing us that we have the genetic knowledge to have our own medical establishments.
Yeah, but a lot of people looking at it like, yeah, this is a trophy moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, something to brag about, but nothing to use as foundational pillar to build on top of at your channel, to stand on the shoulders of giants. You know, too many of us are proud of the work as long as somebody else is doing it. And we have been, you know, Frederick Douglass talked about this in his narrative, where Black people were conditioned to do the things we're doing today. All those things were conditioned on the plantation. We have worked from sun up to sundown just to get to the weekend, where we drink and have orgies just to get to Sunday morning to sober up enough to have church and get right back onto the plantation. We don't ever think about building for ourselves. We think about living for the weekend. I've actually heard people say that I live for the weekends. So, you know, one of the things that that I thought about when y'all were talking was that, you know, as a community, there needs to be a level of esteem that we have for ourselves in order to think that a community is worth building, worth saving. And it's something we all talked about in the Independence Day Project. So you have to love the people enough, love yourself enough to think that this is worth fighting for, not just dying for, but this is worth living for. Because yeah, you can die for anything, but if you want to live for something, now you're talking legacy. You're talking about building your family. You're talking about being a member, a protector, and a provider to a community. So we have to overcome the collective low self-esteem of our community, because everything else is just ego filling in the gaps where our esteem needs to be. That's why you have so many people taking pride in the first Black person to do this, the first black person to do that. You have so many people taking pride in the fact that, yeah, 70% of the inventions that we use are built by blacks, but they're not doing it to teach our children how to become new inventors. They're doing it for bragging rights. That's fine. If I'm whipping your ass and you bragging about the way you can take this ass whooping, I'm gonna keep whipping your ass. Sorry about that, Joe. You have to do a little bleeping.
No. You good with that? You good with that?
You know, because when I look at, you know, how we've been trained and programmed to try to build community, we've been trained to model our enemy, but that intrinsically goes oppositionally against who we are, because our enemies are cutthroat. Our enemies are cold-blooded. Our enemy believes in stabbing each other in the back to rise to the top. The only time they come together in collective unity is to step on us. But we're more communal people. We're the ones that talk about the village. We're the ones that talk about Ubuntu, I am as we are. We even practice that in gang culture. Gang culture in our community is more of a perspective of our community than the people who have white collars and blue collars and call themselves citizens, active, productive citizens in society, because they actually will protect members of their group, their cohort. They actually will wear their name, their bag, their flag, their banner on their chest. They actually will go out and avenge the loss of a loved one, a member of their gang. I'm not legitimizing or justifying gang wars and gang, but I'm just talking about the way they operate. They operate like a tribe. We don't have tribe. We have tribal warfare. And we can go back to the Greeks on campuses. I've seen college Greeks fight like Crips and Bloods and gangster disciples and and vice lords and on all these other games. I've seen that on college campuses. So, when we talk about the build, we have to try to build it in something that reflects us, even if we create something that hasn't been created yet, but it's a creation of our own doing.
So, yeah. And I think we, as the ones, some of the ones who people are listening to, we have to be honest about everything, because tribalism is something that has worked against black people always, since white people showed up. White people played upon the tribalism of black people, because that's a lot of them don't like to talk about. That's something that has always existed between black people. Keep saying it. Hey man, these empires didn't expand just by asking, hey, do you mind if we get a little bit of your land? Nah, tribalism been around. The white folks exploited it, but also,
well, they had their own tribalism.
Yeah.
If you ever watch Gangs in New York, you can see the origins of organized crime.
That's the thing, though. That's a people thing. That's what people do. Yeah. That's what people do, right? But also, looking at some of the statements that I've heard in the past, and I think with it need to go in the context, or it goes in the context of what we're talking about now, because especially when we're talking about the honesty, being honest about everything. We hear scholars say, and they say it as in a joyful tone, as if it's going to be something great for us, that America's falling, America's coming to an end, America's falling. Well, without building real critical mass independent communities, that's going to be horrible for everybody. But of course, it's going to be horrible for the most part, because everybody's not going to be part of the critical mass. But if the critical mass units don't get built, it's going to be horrible for everybody, because if the system that you 100% dependent upon is falling, you fall into. And if America get a cold and Black America get down bad sick, what you think gonna happen to us if America falls? That's why it's imperative for us to be self-sufficient, to create these collectives, to create these critical masses. But we have to be realistic about the critical masses. And that's why I go back. That's why I asked the original question of, basically, we know it's possible for the critical mass these days, but is it probable?
No, it's not probable. It's possible we're capable, like all of those questions are, but that goes into like the realism again. The real world answer is that it probably will not happen, because historically speaking, it has not happened. And that's not just for Black people in America. Like, we can always point out the examples of people overcoming, and we should. They give us hope for the future. But those few examples of people overcoming are just that, few examples of people over. The vast majority of uprisings, of dissident groups, of pushback organizations,
small
social
group.
struggles, the vast majority of them don't end well for
Right.
those people that are in the minority, those people that don't have power.
But those people don't exist today, and that's the main thing. Those type of people don't exist today in mass. Too many.
Well, I
No,
think with it. Go ahead, PC.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, but I think those types of people never exist in mass until it's time for them to exist in mass, if that makes sense. Like,
Hmm?
time creates those people. The times they live in, like, there were a lot of slaves that were resigned to die. There were a lot of slaves. There were a lot of Black folk that didn't even make it over. There were, like, we don't talk about the vast majority of slaves who acquiesced. We talk about the few that push back. And I think that speaks to the fact that it takes a good amount of societal discord and a good amount of trauma for people to finally stand up and say the pain of staying in the way we are now is more than the pain of some unknown future that could possibly be created if I stand up and fight back. So I think those people don't exist, and they aren't going to exist until they need to exist. I think what we can do nowadays is try to set the framework up, try to create fields in the minds of young people that make it easier for those seeds to take root. And that is not what's happening. So like with me, I don't put the onus on the masses so much, because look, I'm gonna just say what I'm gonna say. I think the masses are programmed to be dumb. I think the masses are designed to be stupid. And to be honest and to be clear, I don't think any Black person in America, myself included, is as intelligent as we could be if we were not in this system that is dumbing us down. I think all of us could be smarter. And I think so, even in that, but we can't even have these conversations because we've been programmed to be offended by anything that says that we're anything other than great. And the fact of the matter is, you're not great. You are average at best, and the vast majority of you are a good deal less.
I mean, but another example of like how the tribalism or the infighting for Black people is innate. Like, Black people stop being friends over disagreeing about just pearly things, bro. We found another thing that we found nothing to fight about, and then Black people decided to stop being friends because they are in opposition over the internet white girl.
Well, that's one thing I was gonna say. That I keep forgetting, and it's a point I made earlier, so I'm not pressed about it, but I do want to say it again. I do think the masses of Black people need to be taught that history is not something that's done by individuals. It's something that's done by the collective. Being remembered for being on the right side of history is horrible motivation and incentivization for people to do something. You are not going to spur up the masses with that. When we can start to believe, like what motivates me, and what I've learned motivates a lot of the kids that I've worked with that have become motivated, is the understanding that you don't have to be the next Martin Luther King. You don't have to be the next Malcolm X. You can be a part of the change and feel good about yourself and feel accomplished in that role. The vast majority of people are going to play that role. And that's the pushback I have when people zero it. That was the point I was trying to make earlier when I said the problem with the Emotep story is that people only know Emotep. They don't know that his entire family was geniuses, and they don't know about the community that would create a family full of people that were all geniuses.
So these are the words of Neely Fuller Jr. that I'm going to read to you all. And I go back and check my video for Monday because it's in there as well. If being remembered by the general public after you are dead is important to you, say the following to yourself and say it often. If I am not remembered for solving problems without making any, I am probably not worth remembering. Instead of merely trying to be remembered in the so-called history books, try to do and say those things that will best help to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. Stop trying to be remembered. Stop trying to be the next. Just do your best to make today and tomorrow better for us.
Everybody, not just you, everybody.
Us, the uses.
Well, that's a form of if you're out there and you talk about wanting to be remembered in history books, that's a sign of vanity that we don't need. That's a that is ego. That type of ego needs to go somewhere else. We don't need that type of ego. You do the work and let history judge you for the work you do. But like you said before, most of the people that change history, you'll never know their names because they put spokespersons in front of you. When Black people are identified in history for their specific gains, their specific work, it's done so specifically to kill the dream. It's done so specifically in a manner that's so maniacal. They'll remind you about how great Malcolm X was just to remind you that they extinguished his flame. And they'll do the same thing for Martin Luther King. They'll do the same thing for anybody that's great that's done anything for Black people that have been identified and idolized by us. This is why when you had the movements that did most of the work, that changed things for Black people in society, majority of the folk that did the work, you'll never know who they are.
Right.
And when you talk about great moments in history in America, you talk about the American Revolution, you talk about the Civil War, you only hear about a few names sprinkled here and there concerning it, but what you will hear about is who won the battle on which hill and what time, who fought forces back, and who claimed the White House and who did this, then yeah, you will learn about those incidents that changed the tides in terms of history. You won't hear, they don't specify and identify those people in that manner. The South did, but that was because they were trying to restore a legacy to their men. But for the most part, that's just bad mojo. If you want to move, if you want to bad juju, if you want to, make it light. I think one of the things that's really important for us to understand is that in order to get Black people start loving the team of being Black again, that we have to start young, and it has to be something more concrete, something that sets a harder foundation than the things we're doing right now in order to set that. And we need to have some wins. They have not experienced or exhibited Black people as being wins. So if we wanted to turn this and talk about, fanaticism, basically Black people have turned into fair weather fans when it comes to being Black. We'll cheer for Oscar award winners, we'll cheer for this, that, and the other. But when it comes to foundation doing something that fixes your community, we'll stand idly by and hope somebody else does the dirty work, because we know what happens when the white man smacks our hand. So I'm gonna leave it at that because I'll just keep talking in circles at this point.
Hey, it's on us to make tomorrow better than today was.
Oh, one more thing, Joe. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We can't. It goes back to something else too. We were talking about earlier. When we talk about teaching black children, it has to be us, and it has to be us that does it in our way. For as much as I love the fact that black people are proud of going to historically black colleges and universities, um, the majority of HBCUs were put in place as legacies to white men who had children with bad mentions, and they wanted a place for their white children to go. It was their answer to the Negro problem when they saw black people building their own town at the turn of the 20th century. And they realized that black people were going to go their own way, similar to how Booker T. Washington had designs in terms of utilizing agriculture to build up local economies. So they switched the game up on us back then. They played their dirty tricks. We have to be the ones to engineer and pioneer the teaching, and we have to be the ones to pay it forward. Not looking for a collective payment today. So if we got these Negroes out here that are more impressed about their cars and more impressed about their televisions and more impressed about the houses, we don't need to build with them. We need to build with the ones that want to get down with us in the mud.
Okay.
And I'm laying them up.
There it is. There it is. Let's make our ancestors. Let's truly make our ancestors proud, not just say it. We're going to end it like that. Breakdown Friday, Patrick Irvin, Joseph Ward, Professor Carl Tone Jones. This is how we do it, like a sitcom. We just get into it. There you go. Holla at y'all next week.